Hi, folks. This is Louis Herfin, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shat on TV Westworld podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld Edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO show Westworld. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
This is our fan email episode where we look back on this week's Westworld and provide our feedback on the top listener emails and voicemails for the week. This week's episode was entitled Phase Space. You spent an hour listening to our ideas on the Tuesday deep dive. Now it's our turn to hear from you. Big D, didn't have you on board for the deep dive. Glad you were able to get some rest, and I'm hoping get some even deeper thoughts together for this Telegraph.
Oh, this wasn't get some rest. This was having a 2.5-year-old with teething. It was like having a wild caged animal inside the house. It was not a fun evening, but I'm sad that I missed you guys.
And speaking of absences, Roger Roper is gone for 2 weeks. He's traveling Europe following U.S. soccer. And Carrie Gross also is not with us tonight. She'll hopefully be back for the Instacast. So it's just you and me, Big D. We got 17 emails and a few voicemails, including the return of the butt dialer. So I'm very excited about this.
The return of the butt dialer is fantastic. But Roger's in Europe to watch U.S. soccer. I'm sure he would have had much more fun following them to Russia this summer, but stay safe, Roger, in Europe while you chase around those hot young American studs.
With that said, Big D, let's get right into these. Roll the Telegraph. Okay, the first one is from Dan Cantu, a longtime listener. And he says, this is regarding Elsie being Hale while Bernard is plugged into the Matrix. There is one event that plants the scene in time, the explosion. Hale is with Mustachio Dude in the map room looking at the train coming in. When the train hits, Elsie is with Bernard down in the cradle. She reacts to the explosion. Unless there are two separate explosions happening in two separate timelines, I believe it is just a closed captioning fuck up and Elsie is really Elsie. The same can be said with Gala and Gauntlet. I think HBO needs to fire their closed captioning service and hire someone with a little less dyslexia. I'm waiting for the day when they accidentally type in Ford when Bernard is talking. Oh, damn.
Yeah. To the people who wrote in, like, what's wrong with you guys? It's not Gauntlet. It's not. When you watch with subtitles, I want anyone to watch that scene and not hear the word Gauntlet. I would have bet my life on it. But yes, closed caption fucked up. And there was a bunch of them. The next day, there was one where Teddy said stump. And the next morning, HBO had fixed it. But maybe in most shows, nobody's nitpicking the closed captioning for ballers. So maybe they're just not paying that close attention.
Yeah. And also, I think it's very important here. Big D and I were discussing this off the air and saying, could there have been two explosions? And we're seeing two different explosions at two different times. And again, to me, it's like if the show starts doing that, they're just trying to confuse people. I don't think they'd stoop that low.
No, but they got to realize people are tearing scene by scene and frame by frame apart. At least we're chasing enough rabbit holes. Don't put us down ones that are just obviously not even there.
And before you say that maybe it was the explosion at Fort Forlorn Hope, remember that Bernard was at Fort Forlorn Hope. Although there could be multiple Bernards, and maybe the QA team landed at exactly the same time as a Mustachio Man. So who knows? The next one is from Thomas J. And Thomas J writes in, have you noticed that the first welcome screen image on DalosDestinations.com, it's a famous tourist attraction in Norway called Preikestolen, meaning the preacher's pulpit. Norway and Scandinavia in general has a distinct and unique look with the big fjords and mountains. It looks nothing like the American West or the natural splendor in Shogun World or the Raj. Knowing how much the creators of the show love details and foreshadowing, this cannot possibly be just a random picture. There are 3 parks left to be discovered, so could this be Viking World or even Holling World, set in the Scandinavian Romantic nationalism period during the 1840s? A lot of folklore and fairy tales are set in this period, and it would look quite exotic.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Thomas, he knows his fjords. I have a Swedish mother, so I spent some time in Stockholm, Sweden. I lived there for a year and a half. Beautiful country. It is distinct. And when I went back and I Googled Preikestolen, is what I think it's called in Norwegian, the first 5 pictures that come up are almost exact shots. Like they're shot from the same direction, the same orientation where you can see there's a flat area that juts out, which they call the preacher's pulpit. So great eyes on this. If he didn't get tipped off to this, he definitely knows his Scandinavian waterways.
One of the best things about doing this podcast is the one-liners that emerge between my co-hosts and we. I die laughing because they come out of nowhere. So I just get this message. I open my phone up and there's this message from Big D that says, "The guy knows his fjords." It's like, I got to open this. What is it all about? So anyway, thank you, Thomas, so much for your telegraph. Next up is Michael from the UK. I love all these European telegraphs. Michael writes, "I believe Ford is trying to bring Arnold back, and he is using Dolores' Cradle copy to act as Arnold's interviewer for the fidelity test. Now, finally, the theory. My theory is that inside the Cradle, time occurs at a different rate. On the Daedalus website, it says that the Cradle is used for simulating the narratives. In order for the narratives to be tested thoroughly, the simulation would have to be run hundreds of thousands of times, taking into account every variation that could take place in a narrative. If the simulation was run in real time, 1 second in real time equals 1 second in simulation. The simulations would take years to complete. However, if you run the simulation faster, like 1 second in real time equals 1 week in the simulation, then you can test the narratives much quicker. The hosts are programs, so I can't see why this would not be possible as long as you have enough computing power to run the simulation at that speed. Assuming that is true, I believe Ford has been continuing the work of William for Immortality, trying countless times to bring Arnold back. From William's work, we know progress is slow. I believe that it may take Ford many years to solve the problem. However, due to the time dilation effect of the simulation, it could be 2 weeks in real time before Ford reaches the goal of bringing Arnold back. Theory part 2. After bringing back Arnold, Ford uploads Arnold's mind to the red pearl host brain that Bernard got from the Daedalus laboratory. Ford then puts the pearl in the body he was printing in his lab, another Bernard Arnold copy. Arnold is then put on the beach where Bernard was found in episode 1 of season 2. That might be why Bernard is not acting right. It's because he is not Bernard, but Arnold after having been brought back by Ford. The shock of being brought back has made him act strangely because he is still trying to understand his new reality. I think the first part might be right, but the second theory is probably not right. But I thought it was worth sharing. Anyway, thanks for reading. I look forward to hearing your theories on the deep dive. Michael from the UK.
Yeah, so Michael, I agree. It's much more likely that the host would become sentient within the cradle. With it, the iterations that you could run hundreds of thousands of times, it would be likely that one of those changes would actually result in something unexpected. In that way, we've seen that or heard from the staff that the cradle is supposed to be isolated. One of the reasons you would do that with a system is to keep something contained. There was a book, and I can't remember who it was that wrote it, Robopocalypse, that I think they're finally, unfortunately, Michael Bay is turning into a movie, and it's about AI, and it's about an intelligence that gets out and wreaks havoc on mankind. It's held within a system, and it's given the Turing test over and over again. It becomes aware that it's probing and testing the boundaries of its containment. I think it would be interesting if the cradle all along held the high end of sentient intelligence, and it's been trying to break free all that time, that the robots in the park aren't the brightest or the most advanced free thinkers.
And you're not alone in that, Big D. Other Telegraph writers and other people on Reddit and different forums have surmised that perhaps the villain in this is actually the cradle, or is actually some sort of another AI that lurks deeper. It'd be very interesting. One thing to note as well is in season 1, we talked a lot about how did Ford always know the way things were going to play out, right? Like in the finale of season 1, how did he know that everyone was going to be where they were, when they were? It seemed like he had orchestrated this entire Rube Goldberg machine of a park. And now knowing about the cradle, it makes so much more sense.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. Hopefully we go back into the cradle next episode, because it didn't seem like a normal Sweetwater. There weren't people shooting other people. It just seemed like people chilling around, just walking around. Dolores is playing the piano, something we've never seen her do within the park. Yeah, she played it at the retirement. But imagine if the cradle is just a containment unit, that these hosts could be almost trapped for eternity, walking around in their loop, not shooting each other, not doing anything too interesting, but just prisoners. It would be really a dark twist on what already has been somewhat of a dark and twisted tale.
Big D thinks heaven is prison. You heard it first right here on the Westworld Telegraph. Thanks, Michael, for your Telegraph. Next up is Brendan Costello. If you're creating an artificial life form or intelligence that is going to be an actual replica of a human being, why would consistent responses to a set of questions or scenarios be indicative of success? For instance, why would Daddy Delos decide to have a drink each time William comes to visit? Wouldn't an actual human being be possibly decide not to drink on a given morning? Or would they not phrase the answers to some questions differently, even if the meaning is the same? Fidelity and consistency are not a successful recreation of actual humanity, in my humble opinion. Hope you get this in time. Sorry I'm so late. Keep up the great work. And that comes from Brendan.
Yeah, Brendan. So this is one of the emails that we differed on. I really wanted it in, and Gene wasn't too convinced. And my argument is this. How I respond to a certain situation will differ depending on the tiniest little changes in the sequence of events. If I wake up a little bit later, if I'm James Delos and I decide to ride the bike a couple of minutes longer, I decide to jerk off 10 minutes later, any of those changes will cause ripples into this conversation. Let alone the conversation would never be the same when you have a 55-year-old, 60-year-old senior William walk in the door. The shock of that visual to the James hybrid is enough to change and divert any potential fidelity test.
And I agree on that. I'm with you so far. Here's where I differ is that anytime that this goes back to Gene's mysticism, but anytime I wake up, I have no proof that anything I ever thought existed actually existed, right? You only have the memory of that thing. And then you go about your day as you normally would. So we only see certain run-throughs, right? And that's from the perspective of James Delos, right? We're waking up with him, we're going through the day with him. And so I guess from my perspective, he doesn't know how many times he's been through this, nor does he know what reality has been programmed into his head. So we're only seeing it from the assumption that he's waking up in the same state each time. But you, Big D, pointed out in another conversation we had that his daily routine is even different. So it's not necessarily that, and I agree that, improvisation seems to be a hallmark of humanity, but at the same time, we don't know what degree of programming has gone on there to ensure consistent responses. And also, with regards to fidelity, the fidelity might not be, are you a perfect James Delos? It might be, are you the James Delos we want you to be?
Totally agree.
Thanks, Brendan, for your Telegraph. Next up is Antonis from Greece. And Antonis writes, so something's been bothering me all season long. The hosts are now supposedly woke and freed from their narratives. Woke in the sense that they've become self-aware, aware of their hostness and all that means. However, even the most woke hosts, Dolores and Maeve, actually seem to be nowhere near true self-awareness. This is manifested in very similar ways with both characters. Dolores retains an odd attachment for her father, despite her supposed awareness that there is no actual familiar bond between herself and the other host, known as Abernathy. Maeve, meanwhile, has gone on this absurd quest for 6 or 7 episodes to find her daughter, despite her full knowledge that that part of her identity, which made her a mother, was completely fictional and fabricated by her human programmers. I seem to recall in one episode that the British dude even said this to her directly. He's referring to Sizemore. If these hosts were truly self-aware, shouldn't they be fully aware of the fact that those relationships were simply programming and backstory fabricated by their former human masters? Shouldn't they completely disregard all those previous relationships and attachments unless they form a new post-woke connection, e.g. Maeve and Hector? With Dolores, it's particularly maddening since she seems to be entirely aware of every other hostness, such that she won't think twice about committing mass host murder or forcibly changing Teddy's personality. But then she still misses her daddy? Come on. This has been annoying me to no end all season, to the point that the groans and eye rolls at every mention by Dolores of her daddy or by Maeve of her daughter become an involuntary reaction, earning me several smacks upside the head from my girlfriend, who thinks Westworld is just the best thing ever. And again, that comes from Antonis from Greece.
So Antonis he's mixing two clearly different things. There's a difference between knowing something as a fact and the emotion of feeling something. I can know something to be true, I can know that my spouse is cheating on me, or I could know that I've been lied to by someone else. And it doesn't change from the way that I feel. There's cases where there are fathers who, and this is going to sound like I'm speaking for myself. This isn't, where fathers will find later on in life that they've, at 18 years old, that their child is not theirs. The knowledge of knowing that child is not theirs does not change the way that they feel necessarily. So you can't just, Sentience and Maeve being aware it's not her daughter doesn't change the way that she feels about the fact, because that's who she is.
Yeah, Big D, first, I want to say that I've seen your daughter. That is definitely your daughter.
It is. She was in vitro. There's no way there was any cheating there. We picked those eggs.
So also with regards to kind of to piggyback on what you were saying, Big D, if I, again, woke up tomorrow and found out that that I was a robot, that I was a host, that I was not a real person, that doesn't change the fact that I have that I still have a love for my mother. And even if she was a host, particularly if she was a host, then I still have that bond is still there. And if you think about a parent's bond with their child, if that child's story changes over time, right? They become a person other than what they were when they were a child, but you still love them. And so I think in that sense, you know, Maeve, what else does she have in the world? What else would her motivation be? What, to go out and travel? Like to go out and meet a guy? Like what, you know, that is her motivation. And the same with Dolores, that is her father. She spent a long time with him as her father. He was caring for her. They had conversations. The most real thing in her world is that bond. So whether or not it was fabricated, I mean, every story we tell ourselves is fabricated. It's just made up from what our minds, you know, perceive from the world around us. So again, I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I think what'll be interesting is, remember, she only has the implanted memories when she becomes, you know, sentient, when she becomes woke. Now, over the last, 9, or is it, we're in episode 6. So let's say over the last 8 episodes, Maeve has now started to build relationships with who she chooses to be with. Her little band of travelers, even Sylvester, Felix, Sizemore, she's finally starting to build relationships. And as that goes forward, I'll be curious to see if, as she builds real bonds, if her fictional bonds start to lose some of the grasp that they have on her.
Our next telegraph comes from Charlotte Hickman. She formerly was on the podcast as Girl from England. She says, to me, mortality is a great factor in conscious thought, not only because of the questions it makes us ask ourselves, but also because it is a base drive to survive and react to danger and threat. Even when an elderly person decides they are ready to die, consciously, there is no button they can press that stops the body's drive to survive physically. If I was trying to achieve consciousness in a species that does not die of its own accord or does not degrade, I would introduce a threat that would threaten it and then cause a need to survive. And that is what Ford does. To me, Dolores' reaction to the threat shows a lot of the struggle and complexity involved in facing death, struggling to work out who to trust, falling back on lessons learned from her life, the anger. To me, this shows that Dolores is still in the maze. She's still developing from the path laid out for her by Ford, and maybe at the end of it, she'll be ready to face death with a different perspective.
Yeah, and the problem that the hosts have is that no one really has come to that final end where they do die. They know at any point now, Dolores has brought people back from the dead. You can flip the switch, you can turn them back on. Until that option is removed, and you have the consequence of true death and an end, I don't know that any of the hosts could be truly awake.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that Charlotte points out too is, so Charlotte professionally is a end-of-life caregiver. And so she was talking about how, in her Telegraph, she talks about how young people's approach to death versus older people's approach is vastly different. That she doesn't know if it's an innate response, but most of the older people that she encounters are accepting of death. They're ready to face it, whereas younger people are not. And so it's interesting with the hosts, you know, we regard them as young because they look, you know, Evan Rachel Wood looks young. Teddy, James Marsden looks young. But these hosts are, you know, in their experience, have died countless times. They've experienced that death countless times. And so there is a maturity there. So you get this interesting dichotomy where they've experienced death, at least a perception of dying, yet at the same time, they have that wildness of youth where they don't want to die. And so it makes for a very explosive and interesting dichotomy.
I think it'll be interesting because if the hosts all become awake and they have free will, it's inevitable that some of them would choose to die, that they couldn't get over the trauma that they've gone through. So it would be funny if one of the things happens once they become aware of everything that's gone on, that some of them choose not to continue and we have some robot mass suicide. I think that's potential in a system where the trauma cannot be undone.
We got an interesting email from a GT from LA. It didn't quite make the podcast, but by the way, if you want to read all these emails in their entirety, these are all truncated, so we've got shorter versions of what was actually written. You can go to shatontv.com, go to the Westworld Telegraph section. You can read all of them in the entirety and respond there. We also respond there, so we got a little conversation going on each of these. But GT from LA wrote in and was talking about the allegory of the cave. Basically, the idea that, dragging people out into the light from the cave when they think the cave is their reality. And that could be a very harsh transition. And some people will rather die than go into the light. And I think that we will see that with some of the hosts. We already do see it a little bit in Shogun World, where some of them are like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, remember the story that El Lazo 2.0 tells the Man in Black. The story about the elephants when they're held down by a stake when they're young. When the stake is removed later on, they don't even choose to move because they've have a learned victimization. And I think this could be a case where without that stake, some of the hosts might not know what to do.
The next telegraph comes from Ferdinand C. Ferdinand C. writes, what is the purpose of locking Phil the tech in the exploding locomotive? Won't Dolores need him in order to repair her father once she and her team get him back? Also, considering that she's already showed a little uncertainty about the changes she has imposed on Teddy, would she not need Phil to make further adjustments to him, or indeed to make changes to any other host? And that comes from Ferdinand in New York.
Yeah, fuck yeah. I hope we haven't seen the last of Phil. I made a joke on the instant take that why, if you're doing a sneak attack with the train, why are you blowing the whistle? Woo, woo! That was Phil. Phil saying, hey, train coming in. I hope we learn later that the Phil shot out one of the windows and got out, because he seemed like a pretty smart guy. And I'd like to see him pop up again.
From a metaphorical standpoint, I think that what was maybe being signified here was we saw Dolores, as you mentioned, Ferdinand, earlier in the episode, kind of uncertain about the changes that have been imposed on Teddy. It might be that this is showing that she has solidified her decision, that she is like, you know what, this is the Teddy I'm sticking with. And this is the plan that I'm sticking with. I'm 100% certain this is Dolores making a decision. And she's saying there's no turning back. This is crossing the Rubicon for her. Thanks for your telegraph, Ferdinand. Up next is Angelia Smith. And she writes, I wonder how much real world science the show considers for memory. Every memory that you have is the last memory of you remembering that memory. It's kind of freaky, but it makes it very fascinating that the host can remember things perfectly, assuming there's no riots or leaks in the brain or cradle baiting. So that scene with William and his daughter about the elephants, would that really be the best fidelity test? She was little and he was a distant father who barely paid attention to her, and I doubt he paid much attention to his wife. When I was a little girl, I could have sworn I rode an elephant at Disney World with my sister, but she says it never happened. My uncle and my grandma who took us say it didn't happen. The thing is, the memory of my grandma and uncle are questionable. I guess my sister's memory is okay, so for now I must accept the terrible truth that I never rode that elephant.
I love this one because until I read it, I hadn't thought of it. Yeah, we understand that our memories degrade over time and they become a little muddier. But in reading this about trips that the family had taken, I recounted some situations that I now question, like she does, of a memory is valid, where I used to feel confident, but now I'm almost remembering myself telling the story of that memory. So I don't know what the hell's real anymore, but it does seem more realistic that the Man in Black and Emily would have a differing memory of that event so far back. So we overanalyze and try to find nuance and try to pick every little variation as a definitive fact. Yes, this means this. Sometimes just the little difference goes right over our head and it just proves that they're human.
When we talked about, Emily and the Man in Black and whether the memories were, perfectly intact, it also might be that this scene was meant to illustrate, kind of like in their first encounter when they're riding on the trail, the Man in Black could simply just be that paranoid. Like he's so paranoid that even a discrepancy in a memory makes him go, "Ooh, she might be a host." Like it's furthering that distancing from his family. Perhaps the gap that's been emerging between him and his family is that Westworld is making him no longer understand the difference between reality, and he thinks that everything is some sort of a flippy floppy sham. I mean, really, honestly, Westworld's doing that to us, and we're just watching the show.
Okay, so Angelia, let me serve as the judge and deciding vote in this situation. As a former employee of Disney World, I can assure you there was never an elephant ride at Disney World, so your sister is correct, and I would start to question more of your family memories.
I thought she was talking about like the Dumbo ride.
No. What, is Dumbo all of a sudden just a generic elephant?
Occasionally we get a Westworld Telegraph that puts us on blast, and this is one. This one comes from Stephen Milazzo, and he writes in, I'm writing in now because I feel that you are all missing the point of this show. First and foremost, the ideas you have surrounding William, the Man in Black, are confusing to me. You have somehow elevated his character status to a level that I don't necessarily think it deserves. Yes, he has a character arc, one that is important to the narration of the show, but I do not see him as the star of the show or even a main character. He has little more importance than Teddy. He helps lead Dolores in a certain direction and is mostly there to aid her storyline. Perhaps this will change, but for now he seems not at all that significant. When it comes to the main character, the star of the show, it is a toss-up between Dolores and Maeve. I think the writers want you to constantly go back and forth between the two. Are they both conscious? What are their true intentions? We've seen both of them follow script and yet make choices on their own. Perhaps their journey to true consciousness is still playing out in season 2. The writers have stated this is a 5-season story, so I doubt it'll be so simple so soon. The thing is, though, I don't think you guys are truly understanding the meaning of this show. The fact that everyone's favorite episode of the season, if not the entire series, was the Riddle of the Sphinx seems to prove that. That episode was nothing more than filler with a few key moments in the backstory of the world this story is taking place in. Again, William's only purpose was to drive the story and influence our main characters.
Wow. He came at us with some venom. If you want to read his full email, it's funny. And that's one of the things I like about our podcast is we don't shy away from some critiques, but I have to really strongly disagree that the Man in Black is not a main character. No one has influenced the entire plot line of all major characters more than the Man in Black. He has intersected and influenced every single other character. He has influenced the park's origin up until current day. All the hosts like Maeve has not influenced anything beyond her arc until the rebellion now. So I think the Man in Black and his character development and how he has influenced everything we've seen on screen, I think he has to be considered a main character.
And another point is, Stephen, and again, I do appreciate this. I do appreciate you listening. I appreciate you writing in. Like, you are paying attention, and I get that. And Stephen also did a lot of work to defend Lost. He was like, stop shitting on Lost. And he was like, your critique of Lost is because you don't understand Lost.
I loved Lost. And my issue with Lost isn't that I didn't understand it. It's that the creators, they lied to us. They told us early on that things will have a rational explanation. And they wrote themselves in the corners that they couldn't get out of. So they betrayed what they had promised the audience. So the final scene in the church, I understand it makes literal sense. And I understand what they're talking about. But it betrayed the trust of the audience. So I have an issue with it saying, yeah, it went off the rails, because that wasn't what they promised us.
And Stephen, I would probably agree with this email if it wasn't for something called Westworld Season 2. Because I think Westworld Season 2 has changed the perspective on the Man in Black, on William, and shown that he has a huge role to play in all of this. In fact, there are some people who theorize that the entire thing is about his development. It's the entire thing could even be one big narrative that is just to move him in a certain direction and in some sort of evolution. So also, let's not poo-poo Teddy. Again, as you said, we're in season 2. This thing, if it has a 5-season arc, Teddy could end up being the biggest character in all this. How many shows have you watched where somebody who seemed to be a minor character early on, in the end, ended up being the most important one of all?
Yeah, remember in Lost, the things that were the most important in season 1 and 2, in the end panned out to not be that important.
Anyway, thank you so much for your Telegraph, Stephen. We really appreciate it. Keep writing in. Keep us on our toes. We love you. Next up is one from Peter Bruno. He writes, "Hi, folks. I love your podcast, and I'm always excited to listen to you guys 3 times a week." Thanks for listening to all 3, Peter. My question is this. Why don't Charlotte and Stubbs simply kill Peter Abernathy as soon as they get a hold of him? If all they're really after is the data Charlotte had uploaded into Abernathy's brain, why can't they just remove his control unit and hand that over to Delos? This seems a lot easier than having him bolted down in some insecure room in the Mesa. Do you think this is just a convenient way for the show to prolong the plot and have Abernathy escape with Dolores? Or could this be more evidence that there is something important about Peter Abernathy that Delos also wants? Thanks again for all you do, Peter Bruno.
Seriously, the reason that you put all the information in Abernathy's head, supposedly in the end of season 1, was you had to sneak him out of the park. There's no more seeking shit out of the park. All hell is broken loose. You're not doing this covertly. You even are telling the text, hey, this guy's got something in his head. We need to keep him here. The woodcutter, when they want to take him out from being wedged down in between the rocks, they cut his head off. They bring his head back. This might not work, for a long period of time. You might need to cool the unit. We don't know still the workings of how the control units stay cooled and what the cortical fluid does. But it would seem logical in a fully equipped body shop that you would have some kind of a box or a receptacle that you could remove the control unit, put it into a traveling case, and hit the road. There's got to be some other reason they're keeping the body around.
So I think there's two potential reasons. One is that we don't want to lose Louis Hertham in the show. That would be a real bummer. Two, though, is that they say that a host's brain contains more storage power than all the computers in Delos combined. That's stated in season 1, right? That's why they put it all into Abernathy's head and not just into a control unit. So they had to put it into something, right? Now, granted, as part of the smuggling, too, is that you want him to move around. But wouldn't it be easier to smuggle something that was just in the case? They put it in him to begin with. And I think it's because, A, there might be something special about that particular host. But B, you need the brain matter, I think, surrounding it for the complete picture, the complete data set. So maybe the control unit can hold a certain amount. Think of it as RAM versus ROM. And there's got to be a surrounding, as other people have written in about, that the brain is not just there for looks, it actually is doing something. So it could be that they found a way to put data into organic matter, much like a human.
God, but that's terrifying. Imagine if you had a hard drive with all of your, let's just say, personal adult photos, and that hard drive had legs and it could run around the house. You'd always be afraid that thing's going to get out. So they need to hobble Peter Abernathy if you want to keep him under control, because you don't know where the hell he's going to end up.
In this scenario, can I fuck the hard drive with legs?
Yeah, it's possible.
All right, next up, we've got Drew Signer. Drew writes, I work in film production and wanted to point out one really great detail in the show that was likely a decision by the DP or director. We see the flashbacks or scenes in the cradle are in a different aspect ratio, but I'm pretty sure they also chose to film them on different lenses. It looks like they're using some wily anamorphics that are really fast, open really wide. This creates a different sort of texture in the background and really blurs out or softens the image, particularly at the edges of the frame. They also seem to use a lot more contrast in those sequences, which traditionally makes it feel more cinematic, or in this case, to me, simulated. This creates a contrast to the spherical lenses that are more stopped down for the rest of the timelines or realities. And that comes from Drew.
Drew, I appreciate the professional perspective on this. And I think this is an olive branch that the producers and the production team have reached out to the viewers. Without this clear change in aspect ratio and the tricks that they're doing with the lens and the treatment and color correction, the audience could even get further lost. So I like that they're doing this. I think it's to help keep people engaged. Because if you start entering different realities as well as time frames and which host has which control unit, I appreciate that they're doing it, and they're doing it to keep people in the show.
Thanks for your telegraph, Drew. Up next, we have Aaron. Aaron writes, we have been told that in the 14 days later timeline, the cradle has been destroyed. As a computer scientist, I knew we had one. This may or may not mean that it is gone entirely. If you know anything about huge data centers that hold all of your precious VR worlds, you never build just one. There's likely at least one redundant backup site. In the letterbox scenes with Dolores and Bernard, where she is going through the fidelity testing, this to me suggests that she is trying to bring Arnold out of retirement and create a version of him that could be extracted from the cradle and put into the real world. I think that ultimately Arnold fits into her plan as a weapon that will help to liberate the hosts. We can all agree that Bernard has always been a watered-down version of Arnold. Whether he was an intelligent and talented human being or was always an AI assistant created by Ford, I'm still in the camp that he was the latter. It actually does not matter. What does matter is that where Bernard is weak, the Arnold that Dolores is creating in the Cradle will be much more powerful. She has already done this kind of transformation with Teddy by having the tech reprogram him to better suit her needs. The Bernard that we see washed up on the beach could be this version of a more powerful Arnold Bernard created by Dolores through many runs of testing in VR space within the Cradle. That's it for this week. Keep up the great work. The last Instacast and deep dives for this episode were great, and that comes from Aaron.
Aaron, I love the email. The Bernard that we've seen in the park that we believe was based on a human Arnold, regardless of whether you subscribe to that thought. The thought that she's using the simulation to create a more perfect and powerful Arnold Bernard hybrid to then pull him out would make logical sense. And as a newly formed host, having that host wake up on the beach and get himself acclimated to what's going on and to get his feet under him, I think it's exciting. I wouldn't mind if they went that way.
I do believe that there should be some sort of a backup here, but I also, knowing Westworld, knowing that they do take some sort of liberties in the sense that it makes things more dramatic, or that it might be symbolic of one thing, like the Cradle being heaven and heaven being destroyed, something like that. It is possible that this is the only place that there is no backup.
You work in technology. Have you ever worked for a company that does not have a secondary backup?
I've never worked for a company that has a Cradle.
Okay, touche, you win.
All right. Next up, we've got one from Kenny P., a repeat writer. Kenny writes, I wanted to speak about the powerful scene with Emily and William. He tells her she was afraid of elephants, and Emily corrects him. I think he was testing her to see if she was a host, and when he finds out she is real, he is surprised. We know that he had an estranged relationship with her, and he is genuinely caught off guard that she is there for him. This scene is well acted by Ed Harris especially, holding back tears when he hears that if he goes with Emily to the beach, it will make them even, or at least be a start on repairing the damaged relationship. He is hurt so bad in this scene, he wants to go with her, I think, and his expressions and his eyes tell us as much. As a father of a little girl, and I think Big D can vouch for this, I saw that the man in black is torn in that moment between two missions, family and something else, obviously something much bigger. Otherwise, he would have went with Emily to that beach. I can't imagine right now what it is that would be more important than his daughter. It is the revolving metaphor we get. With the black hat, white hat choice metaphor, the lobby where you pick which hat, it's also shown before Arnold and Elsie reach the Cradle. Sometimes the answer isn't so simple, which I thought was well conveyed in the campfire scene. Emily does lie as to her original intentions for the reason she's in the park, and that's something to watch as the season progresses. She definitely did not want to attend the gala, and she has reasons for being there other than just visiting.
Yeah, so there's a few different options here. I agree. As a father, there's no situation that I would put my daughter second. So I see a possible few different scenarios. One, the man in black is making this sacrifice in a longer roundabout way to protect Emily. If he sees what's going on in the park is truly a threat, as Dolores has sworn to make it to the real world outside the park, he might see that he needs to intervene to act to stop that, and thusly protecting his daughter and anyone else who's left out in the real world. Or he could be he reminds me of an addict, that the park is his drug. And even though he has guilt and he's emotionally wrecked, seeing how he's destroyed his family and he can't say no. How many drug addicts who have to choose between stealing from a family member or knowing that one hit is going to devastate their loved ones, but yet still do it? So I'm torn between he is a drug addict who's powerless to escape the pull of the park, and a father still defending his daughter, even though she doesn't know it.
One, he's clearly got to be at odds with the intention of Delos, right? He is a board member. He would be able, the QA team is there. You would think that a board member would go to the QA team and be like, all right, let's get this under control, right? That's not what he's doing. But also, he's doing it as the man in black. And it's a really peculiar thing to think about. If you were in that scenario and you had a mission you're trying to do, would you be dressed up as a cowboy? Would you be using a 6-shooter? Like, is that the way you're going to roll? You have access to automatic weapons. You have access to, all sorts of things. He's not using a buggy or a helicopter. He's not doing any of those things. He's riding a horse. So there's something to that.
Yeah, so you're leaning towards he's an addict.
I'm saying that, or he might know that there's the problem here to be solved that is not going to be solved by sheer force.
What problem can't be solved with an automatic weapon? Seriously, in this world, yeah, if he wants to truly defeat a threat, you've got me on board with you. He would be using every tool that he at his disposal. So possibly he just still wants to go get that new reprise on his verdict and potentially live beyond the park.
And Kenny, I just want to take another second to really commend you on watching this show the right way. I deeply appreciate the way you wrote this Telegraph in noting what's going on screen, in appreciating the performances from the actors, in appreciating the way the scene was laid out, and really understanding the depth of what's being conveyed here. I know a lot of time there's a tendency to get caught up in the theories, and you did ask some questions about the tactics. You did ask some questions about the plot progression, but it is so important to watch the show on multiple levels and really take in the scenes. I know when we're taking notes on it, I have a tendency to not really catch everything the first time because I'm so concerned with the theories that people are developing, that on the second watch, I really like to just sit back and let it wash over me and feel the show.
Totally agree.
All right, next one comes from Asa. And Asa writes, since years ago, I have frequent episodes of insomnia, but when I start listening to you, it just takes me from 5 to 10 minutes to fall asleep so deeply. There's something really soothing in your voices that I cannot keep my eyes open. The problem is I am truly interested in what you're saying. So the next day or night, I have to find the last minute I can remember and start from that point until I reach the end consciously. Lately, my insomnia has worsened due to my grandma's slow decay. She's almost 95, and I know she'll be gone sometime soon. As the guy who last week thanked you for helping him cope with the loss of his mother, I also thank the TV show and your thorough analysis of it, because now I think I am more capable to cope with what will be my first huge loss, since she's really important to me. But when I see her lying on the bed, a sack of bones that can barely move, a mind that glitches and speaks nonsense and refers to her mother in present time when she's been dead for almost 40 years, sunken eyes that sometimes don't even recognize me, I totally understand Dolores' feelings on her father and start to rethink my concept of human being, because the consciousness that constituted my grandma is already gone. The bedtime stories and the tales of her youth exist now only in my memory. My only wish now is that she doesn't run the pain program, but just goes into a deep and dreamless slumber. Because as a non-believer, I can only rely on the idea that somewhere in the cosmos, there's a cradle holding a backup of her life where we'll continue to laugh and play together endlessly. And that comes from Asa in Mexico.
Man, Asa, very touching email. And unfortunately, it doesn't help you in your case. I would recommend that everyone take time now that, video cameras, everyone's got one on their phone. When my grandmother her health was degrading at the end of her life, she was 86. 8 months before she passed, we sat her down at a table, and for 3 hours, we had her recount the story of her life. Today, those videotapes are some of my most prized possessions that one day, when my daughter is old enough, she's never going to have a chance to meet her. You can sit down and recount and hear the stories. Take the time as your parents, as your family gets older, sit down, document it, and appreciate them. Because I know, for one, I get busy and caught up in everything that I'm doing. And, it's important. We got to do this, got to do that. And in the end, what's important?
Absolutely. And if you don't have access to a video camera, or if video is just not your thing, or maybe the person you're interviewing doesn't want to be videotaped, the StoryCorps app, it's available on iPhone and Android. I use it on my phone all the time. It's a great way. It has suggested questions for you. You can document it. You can even upload to a repository of everybody else's StoryCorps interviews. And it's a really great way. I've done one with my mom. I've done one with friends, family. It's really, really wonderful. And also, I also wanted to thank you for this beautifully written email. The first time I read it, I cried. And this time I got really choked up toward the end of it too. It's really beautifully composed. And we appreciate being a part of your life. So even if we put you to sleep,
Trust me, you're not the only one who we do that to.
Yeah, Carrie was at the Forum Music Festival, and she'd gotten a little vag packy, if you will. She couldn't fall asleep, and she said she turned it on. I thought she was going to say she listened to my. Nope, it was Big D who put her to sleep. So Big D, you're Mr. Sandman.
Good night, everybody.
All right, next up is Leslie. Leslie writes, guys, be careful about the assumptions that you base your arguments on. Generally, what makes me yell at my phone the most is when you're arguing that something is either one thing or another, but the assumption you started with is faulty. This week's problem was the assumption that someone wouldn't misremember their family details, so one of them must be a host. Not true. You can't start from that because, as Roger said, parents misremember things all the time. My mom gets her 3 children's likes confused all the time, and often that's because she admits she wasn't paying attention in the first place. Which leads me to, I don't think that Emily not being afraid of the elephants necessarily means that either she nor the man in black is a host. What I got from this is that this was the moment when the man in black learned just how shitty of a father he really was. He spent so much time in the park on his own, yet he still chose to take his wife and daughter there on vacation. I think we're supposed to understand that no matter how upstanding he was in the real world, he didn't actually know his family all that well because he was too preoccupied with his own quests. And don't even get me started on how mixed up he has his daughter with her mother. There's something psychological going on there.
Yeah, Leslie, thank you for putting me in check. You're 100% correct. We went over this a little bit before, but yes, I realized that my mother occasionally calls me by my uncle's name, her brother, and she's not going through early stage dementia. So it's just shit happens, you know? So yes, not everything that we see on screen is a definitive answer. And we'll take a step back and always try to remember that. And I don't want to get any more letters or emails of you yelling at us. So I'm going to try to become better for you.
All right, Leslie, thanks for your telegraph. Next up is from Vince S., and he's writing about Shogun World. He says, "Hey guys, I've been questioning something about Shogun World since I watched episode 5. Is the park not yet open to the public? 2 things make me wonder if this is the case. First, where are the guests? There are no living guests, no dead guests, not even bits and pieces of guests, which there would be if the ninja had gone off on them. The Delos folks that were dispatched to do the recon appear to have been dispatched themselves before they made it into town, which makes me think they were not able to do any cleanup."
Well, I want to know, is this like a cruise ship? Like, do they have lifeboat drills? And yeah, but I don't want to assume that every guest we would see would be a Caucasian or easily identifiable. Some of the dead, that we've seen strewn about, there was some in that opening scene when they first come into Shogun World where the heads are stacked up against the tree in the snow that startles Sizemore. So there's potentially humans in there. Or was there some kind of a rescue protocol that was enacted in Shogun World that Westworld never got to do?
It could also just be the fact that, there is a cultural obsession in Japan with cleanliness and tidiness. And so therefore, maybe the hosts were like, we got to clean this shit up. Like, let's go. Pika pika, Yeah,
maybe that's what all the wrapped up body parts were. It looked like a butcher shop. Did you notice that? They were clean cuts. They had paper wrapped around the edge, rope tied. Very well. That could have been the guest right there.
Also, Shogun World might just be like the attraction that nobody really wants to go to. Like, it's that roller coaster nobody wants to be on. Like, you get there and people are just getting disemboweled. There's geishas dancing around. You're like, I'm getting the hell out of here.
Yeah, it's the Hollywood studios of Disney World.
All right. Thanks for your very observant telegraph, Vince. The next one comes from Matthew Horton. He writes, "I just want to point out one thing I think you guys might have missed. Emily is never referred to as Grace on the show. The actress is only called Grace in HBO publicity and on IMDb. Never is she actually called Grace on screen. Grace is a publicity misdirect because the show didn't want people to know that the Man in Black's daughter was showing up. If they say they cast an Emily, well, then everyone knows who this person is before the reveal. The show is protecting itself by calling her Grace in publicity. However, that seems to have bit them in the butt because Grace has stuck more than it should have."
So as a Northerner, I don't have a middle name. So I'm strange in that. Most of my friends have a middle name. You as a Persian of the Persian persuasion, do you have a middle name?
I do not.
Okay. Do you have any friends who have middle names?
Sure. I have Roger.
Do any of them ever go by their middle name? Because I'm wondering if it's something as simple as Emily Grace, Grace Emily, that it was a nickname that she was given. Because my sister-in-law goes by Grace, and it was a nickname for Princess Grace when she was a child. So is it potential it's just a nickname?
I mean, it's potential, but I think the point of this telegraph is there's no need to even debate the Grace part because she's never even referred to as Grace. They could have put it down not Man in Black's daughter or like Sally, anything other than Emily, just to say there is a new character coming. It is this actress. You don't know who she's going to be. And then the reveal is that she's Man in Black's daughter. If they put down Emily, this audience, everybody would be jumping all over it.
Yeah, I've not had a good experience with Emily's. Graces are much better.
All right, next up in the Telegraph, we're moving on to the portion that we call actually. This is where you send in your corrections either via Twitter or by emailing us hosts@shatontv.com. And the first one actually comes from a close personal friend of mine. So thanks a lot for writing in, Lissa Budzak. She said, hey guys, I just read this article and then heard the butt dial voicemail in the Telegraph. I wonder if Alexa sent you that weird voicemail. And the article is referring to the story about Alexa spying on the family and then sending it to someone else.
Yeah, so that's possibly, it's disturbing that Alexa has done that. But thankfully, we have the anonymous butt dialer calling back. And that was not the case. The actual butt dial was caused by the listener's dog, if we believe that. But we're going to hear that here in a couple minutes. So thankfully, it wasn't Alexa acting up on our listeners.
Okay, and our final actually comes from Steve. Steve writes in, he says, you guys said that the parks were created for Eurocentric guests. Actually, the Chinese audio at the Mesa's high-speed train station proves they had Chinese-speaking guests, and the Japanese spoken in Shogun World is compelling evidence they had Japanese-speaking guests. Any distortions of the Edo culture are the responsibility of Nolan and Joy, who presumably are catering to the taste of a mostly American TV audience.
Yeah, you take that, Gina Roger. Yeah.
Carrie was responding to a lot of our YouTube comments, and she's like, these guys can't make up their minds. Some are saying that we're the racist white status quo, and other ones are saying that we're whiny liberals who are anti-white. They can't make up their minds.
Can we be both?
I know Roger is.
He definitely is.
All right, and finally, we have an interesting email that comes from Mike Herzog, and he's asking us about the equipment they use. He says, hey, guys, I'm a big fan of the Westworld and Game of Thrones podcast. In fact, you're the only reason I'm able to keep up with the plot of Westworld these days. Keep up the great work. I listened to the recent interview with Lewis Hertham and really appreciated that bonus. As you mentioned, the audio was less than your normal quality. This called my attention to the very high quality that you normally have on your shows. As an aspiring podcaster, I'd love to know what equipment you use for your normal shows. I know you're typically in different locations when you record. What do the team members use? Also, I know that you don't do too many external interviews, but if you are doing one, do you have specific tech that you recommend they use? I appreciate you taking an off-topic question that comes from Mike Herzog.
We do all record in different locations. I'm in Orlando, Florida. The two, Gina Roger, in different locations in Arizona, as well as Carrie Gross. And then Gene and Roger travel quite a bit. So we use, the software we use is Zencastr. So it is ZENCASTR.com. It allows you to create essentially a chat room where you're recording the audio. And the nice thing about it is it records 3 different channels. So if you have an issue with one, you can try to clean it up. You can fix it. But as far as the technology, I have no idea. You guys told me which mic. We all have the same mic and headphones. Do you know what they're called?
Audio-Technica 2100s is the microphone. They're really great. It's a USB-enabled mic, so you can do an auxiliary plug-in to a mixer if you want to do that. So when Raj and I and Carrie record in the same room, we'll go in through a mixer and use the auxiliary cables. So there's like the three prong, and then you can also go USB straight into the computer. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and then
for the headphones for the monitors, we use the Audio-Technica M30X, which is a super affordable. All this stuff is really affordable. Super affordable headphone set, and then we just use the standard pop protectors and muffs to try to reduce a little bit of the percussion from our voices. It's a really simple setup.
Yeah, and then because I think the headphones and the mic was under $100
a piece. Yeah, together they'd be a little over 100, but not too bad.
Oh, and then we use Audacity to edit software as the editing software for the audio. And then I also, since I did most of the editing prior to Westworld, I bought myself a gaming mouse that allows you. It has 6 or 7 buttons on the left-hand side, so you can pre-program combinations of keys that will make editing a little bit easier. But yeah, it's cost-effective. It'll take you time, because if you go back and listen to the first Shat the Movies that Roger and I did with Google Hangout, it's bad. The quality was bad, and you just got to tweak it, keep working on it. And we're at the point now where we have our hiccups now and then, but just work on it. It's not that hard to do.
Yeah, it also, like, I went back and listened to some of those old Shat the Movies, and it was just missing a certain something. I don't know. Anyway, thanks, Mike, for your Telegraph. Next up, Big D is going to do his regular roster of all the people who generously gave to the podcast.
Yes, you guys rock. Even though I said the setup of our mics and headphones weren't that expensive, there is a cost each month for hosting each of our feeds and the website that adds up. So it's been great this season of Westworld that a lot of people have stepped up and helped support the podcast. So this week, I'd like to thank Martin Sepp, Edward Waddell, Eric Sickler, Joanne Morrison, and the big donator this week. Really give a shout out. Thank you very much for stepping up. Ring the bell here for Charles McLeod. Thank you for the support. And even if you guys can't donate, some people write and they say, I'm sorry, I can't give more. And they give $5, $10, $2. Anything you can give is great. Just supporting and listening is nice. Just recommend us to a friend. Give us a review. Share the community with your friends. Anybody who might watch the show, that's enough. But for the donations here, we really appreciate it. It helps us keep providing content and creating it because we're not making money elsewhere. And Westworld will help us get through the rest of the year doing movies and other shows that aren't as big a hit. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks again to everyone who gave to the podcast. We also have some thank yous for shout outs. If you'd like to hear your name on the podcast, you can go to shatontv.com, and on several places on the site, you'll see little boxes for the shout outs. You just put your name in there and we'll read it on the air. This week's shout outs come from Brendan Costello, Sean, Vince, Thomas J. from Norway, Sue, Leslie, Kayla G., Kevin Klinkhammer, Renee, and Marlo Coppin.
Yeah, and then I also want to reach out and say congratulations to Matt from New Jersey and his wife. They just bought their first home.
Congratulations, Matt and wife.
And they listen to us as they're doing work around the house. And Matt said he's usually screaming at things. And when things go wrong, I guess we calm him down as well. So congrats on the new home.
Now it's time for the voicemail. This is becoming an increasingly popular part of the Telegraph, and we've gotten some really interesting ones this week. We've narrowed it down a bit, but they were all really wonderful. We love hearing your voices. I love hearing where people are when they are recording and just getting to know you and getting to know your lives. So our first one is from Andrew from Merced, California.
Hey, fellas, I'm calling about Westworld. I'm Andrew from Merced, California. So we talked a lot in that, or you guys talked in the last podcast about how the simulation works and comparing the way that the simulation works to Jim Delos and how he was like becoming a human host hybrid or whatever. And I have just a simple question, or just a theory. You can shoot it down if you'd like. But if Dr. Ford was ahead of the game and knew that the simulation could use infinite reality in the blink of an eye, this is my idea, is that he may have found a way to speed up the process that William was working on with Jim Delos, speed up that process by processing Bernard or Arnold's consciousness into Bernard, or his own consciousness into whatever. But he could have done all the research that they were still trying to work on, but just kept to himself about it. I don't know. Let me know what you think.
So I don't know that I believe that Dr. Ford would do anything to help the Men in Black. It seems like their goals were always contradictory and opposing. Do you think there's any chance that Dr. Ford would do anything to help, especially the money men that he describes them as James Delos?
I think it's hard to tell without knowing what it is the Man in Black does. Like, what does William do? Like, I understand that he's a titan of industry. I understand that he's running Delos, or a board member at least, but we don't really know what his background is. Is he a doctor? Is he a programmer? Is he an engineer? And so I think if he's not anything on the technical side, then there's no way he could have gotten to where he even got with James Delos without Ford's help. But that doesn't mean that Ford didn't hold back. It doesn't mean that Ford gave him everything. And so it really, you could look at it two different ways. One is that they did 149 loops with James Delos. And in between each of those, over the span of 3 decades, they ran hundreds of thousands of simulations to get to where they were. Or it could be that they painstakingly been going through 149 simulations or 149 trials when all along, Ford could have done that in a matter of minutes. And if that's the case, then he is far more devious than we expected.
Yeah, and I always try to remind myself that the Man in Black, or the William that's in the park, is very different from the William that's outside the park. In season 1, there was a guest who ran up to him and thanked him that the Foundation had literally saved his sister's life. We know he restarted Delos's investigation and research into diseases, even though Daddy Delos had stopped the funding. So if that's the case, Ford would have to know that William outside the park was a different man and potentially would help him. I think it's one of the answers that we'll get hopefully by the end of the season.
Thanks for your voicemail, Andrew. Next up, we have Rob, the butt dialer.
Yeah, and I hope Rob will tell me the best way to make jam sandwiches.
Hi, this is Rob. I'm calling because that butt dial on the Telegraph this week, that was me. I wanted to thank you guys for a good laugh. I called you a couple of weeks ago talking about how my fiance had took her own life, and the 8th of June is her anniversary. So the last little while has been a bit hard for me, and suddenly listening to the podcast and hearing a moment when my dog got a hold of my phone and me talking to my roommate about peanut butter greatly brought a good laugh to me, and I just wanted to thank you guys for that moment. It was greatly appreciated. Bye.
Well, Rob, I got to tell you, I'm glad that you called back because this caused a little controversy within the Ebert home. When I told my wife, I played her the voicemail, and I said that last week that Roger and Gene were going to play it on the podcast. She's like, "You cannot do that. That is such a dick move." And I said, "Come on." I said, "We don't even know who it was." So the fact that you called in now and said it actually gave you a smile, I'm going to run back and tell my wife. So hopefully she can see there was some humor in it, and I'm just not a cold-hearted just bastard.
Robin, after what you've been through, it's so great to hear you laugh. That's just wonderful. Hearing the voicemail, I was driving home, and Big D had sent me all the voicemails to review on my drive, and I was laughing along with you. Just the joy in your voice was really touching, and that's still my favorite voicemail we've ever gotten. It was just like I could not believe it was a real scenario. It was so perfectly constructed. So kudos to you. You're a master of comedy.
Yeah, and please email us. Tell us where you can get 2 loaves of bread for $1.95. Sounds like a good deal.
All right. Our next voicemail comes from Tom W. from North Carolina.
Hey, this is Tom W. again from North Carolina. Again, you guys rock. I really do enjoy listening to your shows throughout the week, and the Lewis Eartham interview was really good. Popping didn't bother me at all. Wanted to share one thought. I think that going in a loop narrative, we're actually going to see Bernard become Arnold. And the reason I say that is even if you go back to season 1, when they are looking at what's causing these things to happen to these androids or hosts, you see that, hey, there's Arnold still in the machine. There's Arnold's code is in the machine. And even when Bernard gets put back in the machine here in the last episode or enters the cradle, she even says, hey, I don't know if I can put you back together the way you are. I'm thinking that in the cradle, he will get uploaded the rest of the information from Arnold, and we will see a full loop where Arnold was real, Arnold's image was used to create Bernard, and now Arnold's consciousness will be implanted in Bernard, and Bernard will become Arnold before the end of this season. Just a thought. You guys rock.
Yeah, so I like the idea that Bernard was kind of a muted or not a full strength version of Arnold. That when he was created, we see, I think it's in one of the trailers for next week, that there's a cold storage for different iterations of Bernard. And we see, I think, at least 3 or 4. It'll be interesting to see if those were all kind of failed attempts or Dr. Ford had purposely handcuffed that version of Bernard to not make him fully aware, fully capable, and that putting Bernard into the actual cradle might power him up. And in that time, you said that time goes differently within the cradle. It could seem like 10 minutes to Elsie, but he could be in there doing 35, 40,000 iterations and fidelity tests with Dolores, that he could come out completely aware for the first time and be more powerful than Ford and Bernard combined previously.
So I've been a big proponent of the Arnold never existed as a person idea. Like that concept, it's always made more sense to me that he is not a real person. And it started with just the oddity of the death cover up and the fact that nobody really seems to have known him except for Ford. But what's interesting is there could be, if Arnold did exist, Ford always wanting to resurrect him, right? And that would explain why you make a host that looks just like him. So we've always said, why the hell, if a guy died, would you make a host that look exactly like him? It'd creep everybody out who works there. It's inappropriate. It's weird. Why not just make a host that doesn't look anything like him? If you're just trying to make an assistant, right? But what if you wanted to make a host that over time developed back into that person, that somehow you could recapture that person, resurrect that person, bring them back online? You would want the body to look like that person, for starters. That would help. So this actually makes a lot of sense if you believe that Arnold did exist and that he can make a comeback with the Bernard body. In which case, it leads me to a question: what do you call him at that point? Is he Bernarnold? Is he Arnold again? Who knows?
You can call him Grace.
Gremley.
Oh, Jesus.
All right, Tom, that wraps up the Telegraph for this week. If you didn't hear your letter on the podcast, remember all of them are posted online at shatontv.com, where we respond to all your emails and guests can comment and interact. That concludes this week's episode. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at ShatOnTV. Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com. Email us, hosts@shatontv.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. Finally, if you like Shat on TV, check out our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we review the best 80s and 90s movies from our childhood that you, the audience, vote for. Our most recent one was an amazing review of Showgirls by Carrie Gross, Big D, and Roger Roper. Coming up soon, we have Labyrinth, so keep an eye out for that. You can check out all the information at shatthemovies.com. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, Roger Roper, and Carrie Gross, I'm Gene Lyons. Thanks for listening. Join us on Sunday night for the Westworld Episode 7 Instacast.